The wedding that changed everything. The autumn sun filtered through rows of grapevines as Jade Morrison adjusted her simple navy dress, watching her twin sister Amber glide across the terrace of Thornhill Vineyard Estate. Everything about today sparkled with perfection, from the crystal chandeliers hanging from century-old oak trees to the champagne tower that probably cost more than Jade's entire year of teaching art at the community center. She had arrived early, hoping to find a quiet corner before the 300 guests descended. But even in the emptiness of the morning setup, she felt invisible. If you believe that true wealth lies not in bank accounts, but in human connection, stay until the end of this remarkable story. Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because what happens next will change how you see success forever. Twin divided by fate. Amber Morrison had always been the sun, while Jade remained the moon, present but rarely acknowledged. Their lives had diverged the summer they turned 15, when a diving accident left Jade with nerve damage in her right hand, ending her dreams of becoming a concert pianist. While Amber flourished in their father's real estate empire, Jade withdrew into a world of teaching children to find joy in simple watercolors and clay sculptures. Their father, Douglas Morrison, had built his fortune developing luxury properties along the California coast, and Amber had inherited his ambition. She was marrying Trevor Ashford today, heir to a hotel conglomerate, merging two dynasties in a ceremony that belonged on magazine covers. The weight of being second. Jade found herself standing near the dessert pavilion, watching the wedding coordinator direct staff with military precision. White roses climbed every available surface, their fragrance almost overwhelming. Ice sculptures depicting swans guarded the champagne station. Everything screamed excess, yet Amber wore it all as naturally as breathing. Jade caught her reflection in one of the polished silver serving trays, mousy brown hair pulled into a sensible bun, minimal makeup, a dress that cost $70 from an outlet store. Next to Amber's radiant beauty and designer gown, Jade looked like she had wandered in from a different universe entirely. Memories of what was lost. Their mother, Catherine, had passed away 3 years ago from cancer, and Jade felt her absence like a physical ache today. Catherine had been the one person who saw both daughters equally, who encouraged Jade's artistic pursuits even after the accidents ended her musical career. Their father loved them both, Jade knew, but his love for Amber came wrapped in pride, while his love for Jade arrived tinged with pity. He had tried to hide it, offering her a position managing his company's charitable foundation, but she had seen the gesture for what it was: a comfortable place to park his damaged daughter where she would not embarrass him. The ceremony begins. Guests began arriving in waves of designer clothing and expensive jewelry. Jade recognized faces from society pages, tech entrepreneurs, entertainment executives, political figures. They air-kissed and laughed, their voices carrying across the manicured lawn. Amber had asked Jade to be part of the wedding party, but only as a reader during the ceremony, safely positioned at the podium rather than standing with the bridesmaids where photographs would capture her. Jade had agreed without protest, as she always did, choosing peace over confrontation. That an unexpected Araval ceremony proceeded flawlessly under a bower woven with white roses and eucalyptus. Jade read a poem about love conquering all obstacles, her voice steady despite the irony of the words. Amber and Trevor exchanged vows that sounded like they had been written by a romance novelist, and the audience applauded as they sealed their marriage with a kiss. The reception began with cocktails on the terrace overlooking vineyard valleys that rolled toward the horizon in waves of green and gold. The shift in atmosphere. Jade was contemplating escape to the gardens when she noticed a change in the crowd's energy. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the entrance, where a tall figure stood silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. He moved through the crowd with quiet authority, and Jade felt her breath catch in her throat. Harrison Blake wore success like a second skin, his charcoal suit perfectly tailored, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples, his blue eyes scanning the reception with purposeful intensity. Recognition and disbelief. Their eyes met across the crowded terrace, and Jade's world tilted sideways. She knew that face from 6 months of video calls that stretched into early morning hours, from messages that made her laugh when teaching became overwhelming, from a connection that had felt too good to be true. Harrison Blake, founder of Blake Global Investments, one of the wealthiest men on the West Coast, was walking directly toward her through a sea of California's elite. People parted automatically, confusion rippling through guests who could not understand why someone of his stature would be here uninvited. Moving toward the bride's forgotten twin sister with unmistakable intention, the moment everything changed, stopped in front of her, and the entire reception seemed to hold its breath. Harrison smiled, not the polished smile of a businessman, but something genuine and warm that reached his eyes. "I am sorry I am late," he said, his voice carrying just enough for nearby guests to hear. "I promised I would be here, and I keep my promises." Jade could not speak. Her heart hammered against her ribs as Harrison gently took the untouched wine glass from her trembling hand and set it aside. Then he offered his arm, his eyes asking a silent question. When she placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, she felt the ground shift beneath her feet, and 300 pairs of eyes locked onto the woman they had barely noticed moments before. The whispers began. Reception transformed into a theater of speculation within seconds. Jade felt every gaze burning into her skin. Harrison kept her hand securely tucked against his arm. The whispers started like distant thunder, rolling through clusters of guests who moments ago had looked through her as if she were invisible. Now she stood at the center of attention, beside a man whose net worth was discussed in financial journals, whose investment decisions moved markets, whose presence at any event made headlines. Harrison seemed completely unbothered by the stares, his attention focused entirely on her. "Confronting the past you actually came," Jade whispered, still unable to believe the reality standing beside her. Harrison looked down at her with such warmth that her chest tightened. "Did you doubt me?" he asked gently. "Every single day for the past week," she admitted. They had met through an online forum for classical music enthusiasts, both posting late one night about the emotional complexity of Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto. Their conversation had evolved from music to art to philosophy to everything in between. 6 months of building something that felt more real than anything in her physical world. Yet she had convinced herself it would evaporate the moment fantasy met reality. Amber's calculated approach appeared through the crowd, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a cloud of ivory silk. Her smile remained perfectly in place, but Jade knew her twin well enough to recognize the calculation behind those green eyes. "Jade, you did not mention you were bringing anyone," Amber said, her voice carrying that particular tone of gentle concern that always made Jade feel small. Her gaze swept over Harrison, cataloguing his expensive suit, his confident bearing, the way important people in the crowd were watching him with recognition. "I am Amber, the bride, and you are." Power dynamics shift. Harrison extended his hand while keeping Jade close with his other arm. "Harrison Blake, it is a pleasure to meet you, Amber. Jade has shared a great deal about you." Jade watched her sister's expression transform. Recognition hit. Even Amber, who had married into considerable wealth, understood what the Blake name represented. Harrison Blake had built his investment firm from nothing, emigrating from England at 23. Now, at 42, he controlled assets worth billions and sat on the boards of major corporations. Family interrogation doozles. Morrison pushed through the crowd, his face flushed with confusion and something that looked uncomfortably like excitement. "Jade, sweetheart, I had no idea you knew Harrison Blake." He pumped Harrison's hand enthusiastically, already calculating the business opportunities such a connection might bring. "How did you two meet?" Jade felt Harrison's hand tighten reassuringly on hers as she answered. "We met online, through a music forum. We have been talking for 6 months." She waited for her father's disapproval, his concern about internet strangers, his protective instincts that had always felt more like imprisonment than love. The business mind at work, but Douglas Morrison's mind had already moved past parental worrying to opportunity. 6 months. That is wonderful. Harrison, you must join us for the family dinner next week. I would love to discuss some of the coastal development projects we have planned. Harrison's smile remained polite, but revealed nothing. That is generous of you, Douglas. Though I should mention that I came today for Jade, not for business networking. The subtle rebuke landed softly, but unmistakably. Douglas blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by someone refusing to play the game he understood best. Sisters alone. Trevor claimed Amber for photographs, and Douglas was pulled away by business associates eager to discuss his connection to Harrison Blake. For a moment, Jade and Harrison stood in relative privacy at the edge of the terrace, where grapevines created a natural barrier. This is overwhelming, Jade admitted, watching guests steal glances at them while pretending not to. Everyone is staring because they are finally seeing you, Harrison said. Really seeing you, perhaps for the first time. Before she could respond, Amber reappeared, this time without her new husband. Jade, can we talk? Just us. Her voice had lost its public polish, revealing something raw underneath. Truth between twins. They walked to a quiet corner of the garden, where roses climbed ancient stone walls, and the sounds of the reception faded to background noise. Amber's perfect composure cracked slightly as she turned to face her sister. How did this happen? Harrison Blake, the Harrison Blake. Jade felt years of swallowed frustration rising. Why is that so impossible to believe? That someone successful and interesting might want to know me. Amber's face flushed. That is not what I meant. I just thought if you were seeing someone like him, you would have told me. Your twin sister. Excavating old wounds, would I have? Jade asked, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. When was the last time you asked about my life? Amber really asked, not just checked a box on your twin sister responsibility list. Amber's mouth opened, then closed. That is unfair. I have always been here for you. You have been here next to me, Jade corrected. That is different from being here with me. After the accident, everyone started treating me like damaged goods, you included. I stopped being Jade, your twin, and became Jade, the one we have to be careful around. Painful revelation tears gathered in Amber's eyes, threatening her makeup. The accident changed everything. Jade, you gave up piano. You became so quiet, so withdrawn. I did not know how to reach you anymore, so you stopped trying, Jade said. And the words hung between them like smoke. You built this perfect life with Dad's business and Trevor and all of this. She gestured at the lavish reception, visible through the garden archway. And I became the sister who made things complicated. The one you loved but did not want in your wedding photos. The admission, I asked you to be a reader, because I thought you would hate standing up there with everyone watching. Amber protested weakly. You told me you hated being the center of attention. I hate being stared at with pity, Jade clarified. That is different from being included as an equal. You made that choice for me, Amber. You decided what I could handle without ever asking what I wanted. The silence stretched between them, filled only by distant music and the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Harrison's in sight when Jade returned to the reception. Harrison was waiting exactly where she had left him, declining offers of champagne and politely deflecting guests who tried to engage him in conversation. He took one look at her face and guided her away from the crowd to a quieter terrace overlooking the vineyard valley. Rough conversation, he asked gently. Necessary one, Jade replied. She looked up at this man who had somehow seen past all her defenses through a computer screen. Why did you really come today? Harrison, you could have anyone. Why me? Honesty. In the garden, Harrison was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes serious. Do you remember our third conversation? You told me about the accident, about losing the piano, about how everyone started treating you differently. And then you said something that stayed with me. He paused, making sure she was listening. You said you felt like you had become a ghost haunting your own life. That people looked at you, but did not see you anymore, Jade remembered. It had been 2 in the morning, and she had been more honest than she intended. "I see you, Jade," Harrison continued. "I see someone who teaches children to find beauty in art because she understands what it means to lose something you love. I see someone who sends me sunrise photos because she knows I work too early and might miss them. I see someone brilliant and kind who has been hiding in shadows because everyone around her decided she needed protecting instead of believing." The weight of being seen, tears slipped down Jade's cheeks before she could stop them. "I did not think this was real. 6 months of messages and video calls felt too perfect. I convinced myself you would meet me and realize I was not what you imagined." Harrison's hand came up to gently cup her face. "You were exactly what I imagined." And so much more. Around them, the reception continued, music and laughter, and the clink of champagne glasses, celebrating Amber and Trevor's union. But in this quiet corner, something else was being celebrated. The beginning of Jade Morrison, allowing herself to believe she deserved to be seen, chosen, valued for exactly who she was, reclaiming her voice as the sun set over the vineyard, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Jade felt something shift inside her chest. Not a fixing of something broken, but a remembering of something forgotten. Harrison had not changed her or completed her. He had simply seen her clearly, without the filters of pity or diminished expectations that had defined her relationships for 7 years. And in being seen that way, she was remembering how to see herself. Not as the damaged twin, not as the accident victim, not as someone who needed careful handling. Just as Jade, whole, worthy, and finally ready to step out of the shadows. The toast that changed everything dinner was served under a canopy strung with thousands of fairy lights that turned the evening into something magical. Jade sat beside Harrison at a table near the edge of the celebration, acutely aware that they had been seated away from the family table where she would normally have been placed. Harrison noticed too, but said nothing, simply ensuring her wine glass stayed filled and her plate held food she actually wanted to eat. He had a way of creating a bubble of calm around them, even as curious glances continued from other tables. Douglas Morrison takes the stage. One Douglas Morrison stood to give his father of the bride's speech. Jade prepared herself for the usual narrative. Her father praised Amber's business acumen, her grace, her ability to balance multiple responsibilities. He spoke about watching her grow from a precocious child into a formidable woman who would undoubtedly continue the Morrison legacy. The speech was beautiful and heartfelt, and it barely mentioned Jade except in passing as Amber's beloved twin sister who shares this special day with us. Harrison's hand found hers under the table, a silent acknowledgement of the sting those words carried. An unexpected defensive, then something shifted. Douglas paused, his eyes finding Jade across the crowded reception. "I need to say something else," he continued, his voice slightly rough. "I have spent years trying to protect my daughter Jade, especially after the accident that took her mother and changed her path. I thought I was being a good father by keeping her safe, by not pushing her too hard, by accepting her choice to teach art rather than pursue the family business." The reception had gone quiet, guests sensing the speech moving into unexpected territory, a father's confession. But tonight, seeing her here with someone who clearly sees what I have been too blind to notice, I realize I have not been protecting Jade at all. I have been diminishing her. Douglas's voice cracked slightly. I have treated my brilliant, talented, resilient daughter as if she were fragile, when she was actually the strongest person in our family. Jade, if you are listening, I am sorry. I am sorry for making you feel like you needed to hide your light to make everyone else comfortable. Tears streamed down Jade's face as her father raised his glass. To both my daughters, may they both live lives as bold and authentic as they deserve. Amber's courage after her father sat down. Amber stood, taking the microphone with shaking hands. I also need to say something, she began, her voice carrying across the reception. Everyone here knows I am marrying Trevor today, and I am incredibly happy. But what you might not know is that my twin sister Jade should be standing beside me as my maid of honor. I told myself, was protecting her from attention she did not want, but the truth is I was protecting myself from acknowledging how much I had let our relationship fade. She turned to look directly at Jade. You have always been the brave one, Jade, braver than I ever gave you credit for. Brave enough to rebuild your life after losing the thing you loved most. Brave enough to find new ways to create beauty. Brave enough to open your heart to connection even when our family made you feel invisible. Sisters Reconnecting's reception erupted in applause, but Jade barely heard it. She stood and walked to where Amber waited, and for the first time in years, they embraced as equals rather than as protector and protected. I am sorry, Amber whispered against her sister's shoulder. I am so sorry for all of it. We both made mistakes, Jade replied. But we can do better. When they pulled apart, Amber was crying, her perfect makeup finally showing cracks. Introduce me to him properly, she said, to Harrison. Not as the billionaire everyone is whispering about, but as the person who sees my sister the way she deserves to be seen. Building new bridges, three of them talked for nearly an hour, tucked away at a table, while the reception swirled around them. Harrison shared stories about his early struggles, building his company, about the loneliness that came with success, about finding unexpected connection through a shared love of Rachmaninoff. Amber talked about the pressure of living up to their father's expectations, about sometimes feeling like she was playing a role rather than living her life. And Jade talked about teaching, about the joy of watching children discover their creativity, about slowly learning to value herself again. The dance floor beckoned as the evening deepened. The band began playing slower songs. Harrison stood and offered his hand to Jade. Dance with me. She hesitated only a moment before accepting. He led her onto the dance floor where other couples swayed together and pulled her close. One hand settled at her waist, the other holding hers gently. They moved together easily, finding their rhythm, and Jade realized she was no longer worried about who was watching or what they thought. Whispered promises, what happens after tonight? Jade asked quietly, her head resting against Harrison's shoulder. After the fairy tale wedding and the dramatic entrance, Harrison pulled back enough to look into her eyes. Whatever we want to happen. I live in San Francisco. You live here in Santa Barbara. It is not an impossible distance, he smiled. I have been known to make the drive for the right reasons. And I am the right reason. Jade asked, needing to hear it. You are the best reason I have found in years. Harrison replied simply, planning a future. They talked about possibilities as they danced. Weekend visits. Jade potentially moving her teaching to San Francisco, where there were excellent community art programs. Harrison adjusting his travel schedule to spend more time on the coast. Nothing was decided definitively, but the conversation itself felt like building something real and solid between them. I do not need you to save me, Jade said at one point. I just need you to see me. I know, Harrison replied. You have been saving yourself all along. I am just lucky enough to witness it. The exit everyone noticed as the reception wound down toward midnight. Harrison walked Jade to her car, a modest sedan that looked humble next to the luxury vehicles filling the parking area. This was the most interesting wedding I have ever attended, he said with a slight smile. And I have attended quite a few, Jade laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. Thank you for coming, for seeing me, for being exactly who you said you were. Harrison leaned down and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. This is just the beginning, Jade Morrison. I hope you are ready. New beginning. She drove home that night, through winding roads that led from the Vineyard Estate back to her small apartment in downtown Santa Barbara. But instead of feeling the usual loneliness of returning to an empty space, Jade felt hopeful. Her phone buzzed with a message from Harrison. Already missing you. Coffee tomorrow before I drive back north. She smiled and replied yes. Another message came through. This one from Amber. Thank you for being patient with me. Let us have lunch this week. Just us. Jade responded with a heart emoji. Something she would never have done before. Reflection and growth. Standing in her apartment surrounded by her own artwork and the simple life she had built, Jade realized something profound. The accident 7 years ago had taken her career as a pianist, but it had not taken her ability to create beauty or find meaning or build connections. She had let other people's perceptions convince her she was broken, but the truth was she had simply been waiting to remember her own strength. Harrison had not fixed her because she was not broken. He had simply been the catalyst for her to see herself clearly again. The morning after the sun rose the next morning, Jade met Harrison at a small cafe overlooking the ocean. They sat outside with their coffee, watching waves crash against the shore, and talked about everything and nothing. Other patrons recognized Harrison and left them alone, sensing something private and precious in their conversation. "What are you thinking?" Harrison asked at one point, watching her watch the ocean. Jade smiled, turning to face him fully. "I am thinking that sometimes the best things happen when you stop hiding and start believing you deserve to be seen." Full circle months later, at Christmas dinner with both families, Douglas Morrison would tell the story of his daughter's wedding, where a billionaire crashed the reception for the quiet twin sister no one had been paying attention to. He would tell it with pride rather than disbelief, finally understanding that Jade had never needed protecting, she had needed belief. Amber would laugh and add her own perspective, grateful that the wedding had become a catalyst for rebuilding her relationship with her sister. And Jade would sit beside Harrison, holding his hand under the table, knowing that her story had not been about being rescued or completed by someone else. It had been about finding someone who saw her clearly enough that she could finally see herself, not as the damaged one, not as the lesser twin, not as someone who needed careful handling, just as Jade Morrison, exactly as she was, exactly as she had always deserved to be seen, whole and worthy and finally standing fully in her own light.